The Galactic Council was the heart of the universe, a massive organization controlling thousands of advanced alien civilizations. It was a place where power, laws, and diplomacy ruled over the stars, and no species could break its rules without facing severe consequences. With its sprawling network of planets and the most powerful beings in existence, the Council believed it was above all else. Peace, they claimed, was the most important thing. But not every species agreed. One such species, Earth's human race, had just been welcomed into the galactic community. After a long history of war and survival, humanity had finally found a place in the cosmos. Earth's people had learned to adapt, to obey, and to keep quiet. They had no choice, challenging the Council meant death. But that didn't mean all was peaceful on Earth. Dr. Helena Carter, a brilliant scientist, was on the brink of a great breakthrough. Her research into advanced energy systems could change the course of history, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. However, her work had also attracted the attention of the Galactic Council, whose ruling members didn't like the idea of a human, especially one who wasn't even fully aware of their power, disrupting the balance of the galaxy with such potential. Dr. Carter's young daughter, Lily, was a bright and curious child. She spent her days learning about the stars, visiting the spaceports, and dreaming of a future among the stars. But one day, while visiting a galactic trading hub with her mother, something went horribly wrong. Lily witnessed a covert deal between alien factions, one that violated the Galactic Council's strict regulations. The Council had eyes everywhere, and it didn't take long for them to notice. Fearing the potential fallout of a human child knowing too much, the Galactic Council decided that Lily had to be silenced. No mercy. No trial. They accused her of espionage, framing her for something she never even understood. They didn't care that she was just a child. The Galactic Council saw her as a threat to their control. Despite Earth's desperate pleas, their voice was ignored. Governments, diplomats, and even the most powerful allies of Earth begged the Council to reconsider. But the wheels of the Galactic Council were merciless, and Lily was executed without hesitation. In their eyes, it was a simple decision: one less child, one less problem. But to humanity, it was an unspeakable crime. It was the moment the galaxy underestimated what humans were capable of. The death of Lily Carter shattered something inside Earth's people. For centuries, humanity had been subjugated by the great galactic powers, told to stay quiet and obey. But the murder of a child, an innocent, curious child, was a line that could not be crossed. The grief was overwhelming, but beneath it, a fire was beginning to burn. Across Earth, whispers began to spread. A child had been killed, and no one would face justice for it. The Galactic Council's power was unquestioned, but they had made a dangerous mistake. They had underestimated the humans' will to fight for those they loved. The people of Earth weren't going to sit back and take this. They weren't going to let this injustice slide. The people of Earth began to rise, not just in anger, but in determination. In the shadows of history, they remembered something long forgotten. There was a fleet of powerful warships and soldiers, hidden deep within the secret corners of Earth's history. These ships had been built decades ago, long before humanity had signed any treaties with the Galactic Council. These ships were meant for one purpose only: to defend Earth from the very same forces that now controlled their fate. For years, this fleet had been forgotten. The last remnants of it had been buried away by those in power who feared what it could do. But now, the time had come to awaken it. The fleet's legacy had been erased from history, its existence buried beneath layers of lies and secrecy. Only a few knew of it. Only a handful of Earth's brightest and bravest remained, hidden away, waiting for a time like this. In a dark underground facility, long abandoned and forgotten by nearly everyone on Earth, a small group of individuals began to stir. They were the descendants of those who had originally built the fleet, and now, the responsibility had fallen on their shoulders. They were leaders, soldiers, and scientists, and they all understood the importance of the moment. Commander Mark Harris, a former military officer and the last known captain of the Forgotten Fleet, was one of the first to receive the call. He had spent years living in quiet retirement, haunted by the memories of a war he'd hoped was long over. But when news of Lily's death reached him, something inside him snapped. He couldn't stand by while the Galactic Council silenced a child. He couldn't allow this injustice to go unchallenged. Harris began to assemble a team, a group of individuals who had once served in the fleet but had since disappeared into the shadows. Some had retired, others had gone into hiding, but all of them were willing to risk everything for Earth's future. The group began to piece together the fragments of the fleet's old ships, using technology that was long considered obsolete by the rest of the galaxy. The ships were slow, outdated, and lacking in the advanced systems that the Galactic Council's forces boasted, but they had something that the Council's forces didn't: humanity's raw determination. Word spread quickly. The death of one child had united Earth in a way that no treaty or galactic diplomacy ever could. Humanity would rise from the ashes of its own grief and fight back against the galaxy's most powerful forces. The Galactic Council might have thought they had crushed Earth's spirit, but they had awoken a beast they could never control. Humanity was about to remind the galaxy why no one should ever underestimate them. Long before Earth made its first tentative steps into the wider galaxy, humanity faced threats that were beyond imagination. In the early days, after Earth discovered the vastness of the universe and realized it wasn't alone, there was fear. The galaxy was home to powerful, ancient civilizations, beings far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Earth was just a small, fragile planet in a dangerous galaxy, and it was vulnerable. Back then, Earth's leaders were faced with a difficult choice. They could either isolate themselves from the galaxy and live in constant fear, or they could find a way to protect their people from the advanced alien civilizations who might one day turn on them. The decision was made in secret, far from the eyes of the public, by a group of Earth's most brilliant military strategists and scientists. They knew that survival in the galaxy meant having a defense force capable of standing up to any threat. What followed was the creation of the Earth Fleet, a powerful, secretive armada of warships, each built with Earth's best technology, enhanced with weaponry and shields that could match the finest galactic civilizations. The fleet was designed to operate in complete secrecy, hidden away in the farthest reaches of space, known only to a handful of Earth's top officials. It was humanity's greatest weapon, kept in the dark in case the galaxy ever turned against them. But Earth's rulers also knew that such a fleet was dangerous. A fleet capable of challenging the most powerful forces in the galaxy was a threat, not just a defense. So, the fleet was kept out of public knowledge. The people on Earth were told nothing of their hidden savior in the stars. The fleet's existence was kept secret, and any record of its creation was erased from the history books. The commanders and crew who had worked on these ships went into hiding, leaving behind only cryptic messages and forgotten technology. For years, the fleet remained dormant. It was humanity's secret weapon, and the people were told nothing of it. The rest of the galaxy, including the mighty Galactic Council, believed that Earth was just like any other young species, content to play by the rules and stay under the protection of the larger galactic powers. But the truth was that Earth had always been preparing for the day when they would need to defend themselves. Then, everything changed. After Earth's first formal contact with the Galactic Council, a peace agreement was signed. The powerful Council, seeing Earth as a potential ally rather than a threat, offered the planet a place in the galactic order. The Council's message was simple: peace would be maintained, and any threat to that peace would be crushed. Earth, eager to join the intergalactic community, agreed. With the treaty signed, humanity was forced to put aside its fears and follow the Council's rules. They were no longer alone, but they were also no longer in control. The fleet, which had been built to protect humanity, was now seen as an unnecessary relic. The leaders of Earth, in their efforts to fit in with the galactic order, ordered the fleet to be disbanded. Ships were decommissioned, weapons systems were shut down, and many of the fleet's top officers were either reassigned to peaceful posts or forced into retirement. Slowly, the fleet's existence was erased from memory. Documents were destroyed, files were deleted, and even the memories of those who had once commanded the fleet were rewritten. As Earth embraced this new era of peace, the fleet was forgotten. The people of Earth, no longer aware of the power that had once been theirs, began to live their lives under the protection of the Galactic Council. They built cities, advanced their technologies, and explored new worlds, without ever realizing that their greatest defense had been quietly dismantled. The fleet had become a myth, a part of history that no one remembered or even believed existed. The captains and crews who had served in the fleet went into hiding. Some chose to live in silence, knowing that their work would never be needed again. Others scattered to the far corners of the galaxy, disappearing into the vastness of space, their skills and knowledge remaining a well-kept secret. No one knew where they went, or if they were still alive. The legacy of Earth's fleet was buried so deeply that it seemed to have vanished entirely. But even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, whispers of the fleet's existence remained. Among those who had been loyal to Earth, there were still those who remembered what had been lost. They remembered the ships, the technology, and the courage of the men and women who had once served in that fleet. They knew that if the day ever came when Earth needed to fight back, the fleet would be their only hope. And that day had come. When Lily Carter was killed by the Galactic Council, a spark was lit across Earth, a spark that would eventually lead to the awakening of the forgotten fleet. It wasn't just a spark of anger or revenge, but a flame of determination. The people of Earth realized that they couldn't rely on the Galactic Council anymore. They couldn't wait for peace to protect them, not after the death of an innocent child. The fleet, once hidden and forgotten, was humanity's last chance. The decision was made. It was time to bring the fleet back. The commanders and soldiers, long hidden away, began to find each other. The old ships, buried in forgotten hangars, were slowly brought back to life. The technology that had been discarded was dusted off, repaired, and reactivated. And slowly, one by one, the ships of Earth's forgotten fleet began to rise from the depths of space. The Galactic Council had made a grave mistake. They had thought humanity was weak, that they would remain obedient and fearful. But in their arrogance, they had awakened a power far greater than they realized, one that had been lying dormant for years, waiting for the right moment to strike back. The Earth fleet was ready to rise again, and this time, nothing would stand in its way. The death of Lily Carter was more than just a tragedy for Earth, it was a wake-up call. A child had been murdered by the most powerful government in the galaxy, and nothing was done to stop it. The Galactic Council's cold, calculated action set off a storm of anger, grief, and determination across the planet. In every corner of Earth, people who had once been quiet, who had once accepted their place in the galaxy, now felt something rise within them. They could not stand by any longer. They would not let a child's life be lost without retribution. At first, the rage was silent. People whispered in the streets, gathered in dark corners to talk of what had happened. The murder of a child wasn't just an attack on one family, it was an attack on humanity itself. But as the weeks passed, this silent grief turned into action. More and more people began to rise up. It wasn't just the family of Lily Carter who mourned, it was all of Earth. Every mother, every father, every citizen who had ever loved a child felt the loss as if it were their own. In the shadows of this rising fury, a small group of people, once part of the secret Earth fleet, knew what had to be done. They had been waiting for this moment for years, knowing that one day, Earth's leaders would make a mistake. They knew that humanity would be forced to rise again. And now, that time had come. The fleet, the forgotten fleet, had been buried deep beneath Earth's surface, its ships abandoned and its technology lost. But there were still those who knew how to bring it back to life. Among these people was a man named Commander Mark Harris. Once a highly decorated officer of the Earth fleet, Harris had been retired for years, living in obscurity. He had seen the horrors of war, had lost friends and comrades in battles fought in distant parts of the galaxy. After the fleet was disbanded, he had gone into hiding, convinced that Earth's future was no longer his concern. He had built a life away from the military, away from the horrors of conflict. But when news of Lily's death reached him, something inside him changed. Harris had never been the kind of man to back down from a fight. He had spent his life defending Earth, protecting his people. But as the years passed, he had let go of that duty. The peaceful life he had built now felt hollow, meaningless. The murder of Lily Carter brought everything rushing back to the surface, the memories, the battles, the people he had lost. Harris couldn't ignore it. He couldn't just sit by and do nothing. The death of an innocent child had awakened something deep inside him. He knew that if Earth was ever going to fight back, he was the one who needed to lead them. He didn't act alone. As he reached out to former officers, military personnel, and the scattered remnants of Earth's once powerful fleet, Harris found something he hadn't expected: hope. Though the fleet had been disbanded and erased from history, there were still those who had served in it, still those who remembered its power, its promise, and its purpose. Many of them had hidden away, keeping their skills and knowledge secret, but they had never forgotten what they had once been a part of. Now, they were ready to rise again. Harris soon found himself surrounded by a ragtag group of humans, outcasts, hackers, engineers, and former soldiers, each with their own reason for joining the fight. They were not the elite soldiers they once were, but they were determined. They were the forgotten ones, the people who had been overlooked and cast aside, but they had one thing that the Galactic Council didn't: passion, grit, and an unwavering desire for justice. There was Elena, a former fleet engineer who had worked on the fleet's weapons systems. After the fleet was decommissioned, she had taken to working in the black market, selling advanced tech to anyone who would pay. But when she heard of Lily's death, her conscience could no longer be ignored. She knew that the weapons she had once helped build could be used for something much greater than profit. Now, she was determined to put her skills to use for the greater good. Then there was Jace, a brilliant hacker who had once been part of a covert team responsible for intercepting enemy communications. Jace had gone off the grid years ago, his skills now used to break into government systems and expose corruption. But Lily's death stirred something in him. The galaxy might have thought Earth was weak, but Jace knew better. He had seen the depths of the Council's power, and he was ready to use his skills to tear it apart. Together, this group of misfits began to work tirelessly to reactivate Earth's forgotten fleet. They dug into the deepest corners of Earth's military archives, uncovering old blueprints, and scouring abandoned facilities where the fleet had once been hidden. It wasn't easy. The fleet had been buried for years, and the technology was outdated, even by Earth standards. But the team was resourceful. Elena worked to repair the fleet's ships, Jace hacked into old systems to gather intelligence, and Harris, though older, and no longer the young, battle-hardened captain he once was, began to train the new recruits. But they had to move quickly. The Galactic Council was not blind. They had already begun to notice the stirrings of rebellion. Their spies had reported strange activities on Earth, old military sites being reopened, unusual communication signals from previously abandoned locations. The Council, aware that the fleet might soon be reborn, began to send agents to Earth to investigate. But it was too late. The fleet was already on the move. Commander Harris and his team knew they didn't have much time. The fleet was reactivating, but Earth wasn't ready for a full-scale war. The old warships, though powerful, were far from perfect. The crew was inexperienced, and Earth's technology was far behind the Galactic Council's. But the fleet was humanity's last chance for justice, and they would fight with everything they had. The call to arms had been made. The ragtag team of rebels, led by a grizzled former captain, was ready to fight. Earth's forgotten fleet was rising from the ashes. The Galactic Council would soon learn the true cost of underestimating humanity's will to fight. The fight for vengeance, for justice, and for the future of humanity had just begun. The ragtag group of rebels, Commander Harris, Elena, Jace, and the others, had managed to bring the forgotten fleet back to life, but they knew the odds were stacked against them. Earth's fleet had been dormant for years, and its ships were old, outdated models compared to the advanced forces of the Galactic Council. The ships that had once been the pride of humanity's military had been neglected and buried in silence, hidden away in secret facilities. Now, as they prepared to take on the most powerful forces in the galaxy, they knew their fleet was no match for the Council's technological superiority. The fleet was small, too small to face the entire might of the Galactic Council head-on. Their only hope was a carefully crafted plan to strike at the heart of the Council's power. The group had scoured old archives and long-forgotten military databases, looking for anything that might help them find a weakness in the Council's grip on the galaxy. That was when they discovered the star maps, ancient, detailed charts showing the way to a secret, heavily guarded world, the Galactic Council's inner hub, a planet where the most advanced AI systems and the most powerful alien races in the galaxy came together to rule with an iron fist. The hub was hidden deep within the heart of the galaxy, surrounded by layers of defense, from cloaking devices to high-tech security systems. But the group had no choice. This was the key to defeating the Council and exacting vengeance for Lily Carter's death. The hub was where the Council's most powerful leaders gathered, and where the fate of thousands of worlds, including Earth, was decided. If they could infiltrate this world, they might be able to strike a decisive blow. But doing so would not be easy. The hub was known for its advanced technologies, and Earth's fleet was still a relic of a forgotten era. As they prepared for the mission, the rebels knew they would be outmatched. The ships that made up Earth's fleet were slow, clunky, and lacking the advanced weaponry and shielding that the Council's forces had. Earth's technology had never been as sophisticated as that of the galactic powers. The ships were sturdy, yes, but they didn't have the same advanced cloaking devices that the alien races used to disappear into the stars or the AI-controlled warships that could anticipate every move an enemy made. Earth's ships weren't equipped with energy shields that could withstand the Council's laser-based weapons, and their weapon systems were rudimentary at best. Commander Harris knew that if they wanted to survive this mission, they would need more than just courage. They would need to rely on ingenuity. He gathered his team to discuss the risks. They would have to get past defenses that were beyond anything they had ever seen. But if there was one thing humans had learned from centuries of struggle, it was that they were resourceful. The Galactic Council had underestimated them before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The team began to brainstorm ways to level the playing field. Elena, the former fleet engineer, spent countless hours in the fleet's engineering bay, trying to upgrade the outdated ships. She worked day and night to retrofit the old warships with whatever technology they could salvage. It wasn't easy, but with her knowledge and the team's determination, they made it work. They managed to reinforce the ships with stronger alloys and jury-rigged makeshift energy shields, but it was still no match for the Council's advanced weapons. What they lacked in tech, they would have to make up for with strategy. Meanwhile, Jace, the hacker, went to work on the fleet's communication systems. The Galactic Council relied heavily on AI and automated systems to control their vast fleet of warships, but Jace believed that the key to taking them down might lie in disrupting those systems. If he could infiltrate the AI-controlled warships and mess with their programming, they might be able to turn the Council's own forces against them. It was a risky plan, but it was their best shot. Jace hacked into the fleet's old communication systems, accessing outdated data streams and working around firewalls that were decades old. As he dug deeper, he discovered that the Council had been using a network of cloaked satellites to track all incoming ships. These satellites were capable of detecting even the slightest movement in deep space, making it almost impossible for ships to enter the hub undetected. However, Jace realized that the satellites were not perfect. There were weaknesses in the system, gaps in the network that they could exploit. If they could slip through unnoticed, they might have a chance. With a plan in place, the rebels set out toward the Galactic Council's inner hub, knowing that every move would be crucial. Their first obstacle was the journey itself. Earth's ships were not equipped with the advanced cloaking technology used by the Council's forces. The Council's warships could vanish into thin air, making them impossible to track. But Earth's fleet had no such advantage. The rebels would have to rely on stealth and timing to avoid detection. Any misstep could mean the end of their mission before it even began. As they approached the hub, the fleet's outdated ships faced constant challenges. Cloaking devices, AI-controlled warships, and laser-based defense systems were everywhere. Every time they thought they had a way in, a new obstacle appeared. The Galactic Council had created a perfect defense, a system that seemed invincible. But despite the odds, the rebels pressed on. The fleet moved slowly, carefully, weaving through asteroid fields and abandoned stations in the hopes of avoiding the Council's surveillance. The tension was palpable. Each ship was a fragile thread in a web of defenses that could unravel at any moment. If one ship was detected, the entire fleet would be compromised. But the rebels were determined. They had no other choice. As they neared the hub's outer defenses, they saw the true power of the Galactic Council's technology. Massive AI-controlled warships patrolled the borders, their cloaking devices making them nearly invisible until they were right on top of you. But the rebels had one advantage: they knew the area better than anyone. They had studied the star maps, and they knew the hidden paths that would allow them to sneak past the Council's watchful eyes. They followed the old routes, dodging satellites and avoiding detection. The rebels knew they were outmatched technologically, but they also knew that sometimes, sheer willpower and resourcefulness could make all the difference. Their plan wasn't perfect, but it was their only hope. They had come too far to turn back now. The fight for Earth's future, and for revenge, was about to begin. The Galactic Council would learn that humanity was no longer the weak, insignificant species they had once thought it was. The time had come. The rebels, with their outdated ships and limited resources, were finally ready to engage in the first direct confrontation with the Galactic Council's enforcers. They had moved carefully, navigating through asteroid fields and dodging satellites, but now they had to face the full might of the Council's military forces. The inner hub, where the Council's leaders resided, was just ahead, but standing between them and their goal was a fleet of powerful warships, alien enforcers tasked with protecting the hub. These ships were massive, heavily armed, and led by some of the most advanced AI in the galaxy. Earth's fleet, made up of old warships and a crew of inexperienced soldiers, was hopelessly outmatched. But the humans had one thing that the aliens could never anticipate: their tactics. Despite their technological disadvantages, Earth's crew had been trained for war, and more importantly, they had a burning desire for vengeance. Commander Harris and his crew knew they couldn't fight the Council head-on, but they could fight smart. They had to use their knowledge of the galaxy's star systems, their enemies' weaknesses, and their own cunning to win this battle. The fleet came out of the shadows of an asteroid belt, positioning themselves just outside the range of the Galactic Council scanners. Their old ships, despite their outdated technology, were still faster and more agile than the hulking warships of the Council. The rebels had no cloaking devices, no AI-controlled warships, but they had one thing the Council didn't: the element of surprise. With a single signal from Commander Harris, the fleet moved in. The plan was simple but dangerous. Earth's ships would split into smaller groups, targeting the enforcers' weak points, distracting them long enough for the main force to deliver a devastating blow. Harris knew they couldn't afford a prolonged battle. One wrong move, one misstep, and it would all be over. But if they could land a decisive strike, they might have a chance at crippling the Council's defense. The first few minutes of the battle were chaos. The Council's warships opened fire with lasers that tore through space, cutting down anything in their path. But the humans were quick. The smaller ships darted through the laser fire, narrowly avoiding destruction. The humans weren't trying to destroy the entire fleet, they were aiming for weak spots, targeting engines and shield generators, places where a well-placed shot could cause massive damage. Their goal wasn't just to fight, but to survive long enough to inflict a serious blow. The battle raged on, with the humans using every trick they knew to stay alive. They used the asteroid fields to their advantage, hiding behind rocks and debris, making it harder for the Council's ships to track them. Jace, the hacker, was in constant communication with the fleet, scrambling enemy sensors and interfering with the AI-controlled systems, making it difficult for the Council's ships to lock onto their targets. Every shot was carefully planned, every movement calculated. The humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their future. But even with their superior tactics, the rebels were outgunned and outmanned. The Council's enforcers weren't just skilled, they were relentless. They adapted quickly, countering every move the humans made. One by one, Earth's ships were hit, taking damage that would be impossible to repair on the fly. And in the midst of the battle, as Harris watched the enemy fleet grow larger and more intimidating, the reality of the situation began to set in. They were facing an enemy that had been entrenched in power for centuries. The Galactic Council had all the advantages, they had the tech, they had the numbers, and they had the experience. Then, in the heat of the battle, tragedy struck. A critical moment arrived when one of the rebel ships, piloted by Captain Lila Sanders, a former fleet officer and one of the few experienced leaders the fleet had, was struck by a massive energy blast. The ship's engines exploded, sending a shockwave that rocked the surrounding ships. Sanders had been a key figure in the rebellion, someone the crew trusted and looked up to. She had been one of the first to step up when the fleet was reactivated, offering her skills and leadership. Her death hit hard, and the entire fleet felt the loss. Commander Harris was on the comms immediately, trying to rally the crew. The rebels had lost a key player, but they couldn't afford to stop now. The death of Sanders was a brutal reminder of what was at stake, but it also fueled their resolve. Her sacrifice had not been in vain. Her courage in the face of overwhelming odds had shown them what was possible, and now they had to honor her memory by finishing the fight. As the shock of her death settled in, the crew began to feel a change. What had once been a battle for revenge was now a battle for survival. Every person on the fleet understood that they were fighting for more than just victory, they were fighting for each other. They couldn't let Sanders' death be in vain. The crew's internal conflict had shifted. Doubts that had crept into their minds were replaced by determination. They would finish this fight, no matter what. With renewed energy, the rebels pressed on. The death of Captain Sanders sparked something deep within the crew, a shared understanding that they were all in this together. They fought not just for revenge, but for humanity's future, for their loved ones, and for those who had already given their lives in this war. The battle was far from over, but the humans had proven something important: even with the odds stacked against them, they were not to be underestimated. Their tactics, their will to survive, and their unity were powerful weapons, even against the most advanced alien forces. The rebels' strategy began to show results. The Council's warships, once thought to be invincible, began to show signs of vulnerability. A few of the enemy ships had been disabled, and the humans were gaining ground. The rebels had struck a blow, surprising the Galactic Council, who had believed the humans to be weak and incapable of mounting such an assault. But now, the tide was beginning to turn. The humans had proven that they could fight back, even when everything seemed lost. The first victory in this long and bloody battle had been won, but it came at a great cost. The death of Captain Sanders would never be forgotten. Her sacrifice, along with the sacrifices of many others, would fuel the rebellion as it pushed toward its ultimate goal. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity once, but they would not make that mistake again. The first victory had been hard won, and the human rebels knew it was only the beginning. The death of Captain Sanders and the struggle they had endured to deliver their surprise strike had sent a powerful message to the Galactic Council. But it also had consequences. The Galactic Council, infuriated by the audacity of the humans and their defiance of the established order, was not going to let this act of rebellion go unpunished. The Council had long controlled the galaxy with their advanced technology and ruthless rule, and they were not about to let a ragtag fleet of outcasts change that. Their response was swift and brutal. A massive retaliatory force was dispatched, a fleet so large and so powerful that it seemed impossible for Earth's survivors to stand against it. The Galactic Council wasn't just sending their most advanced ships, they were sending everything they had. Thousands of warships, heavily armed and protected by some of the most sophisticated AI-controlled systems, sped toward Earth's fleet, their mission clear: crush the human resistance and remind them of their place in the galaxy. It wasn't just about punishing Earth's rebels anymore, it was about making an example out of them. The Council wanted to show humanity that no one, no matter how determined, could defy the galactic order and get away with it. The human fleet, now a symbol of Earth's last stand, braced itself for the oncoming storm. Commander Harris gathered his team and surveyed the situation. They had already lost so much: one of their best leaders, countless soldiers, and many ships. Yet, they couldn't afford to give up. The stakes had escalated beyond revenge. This was about survival. Earth was the cradle of humanity, and its people had no choice but to fight for it. But how could they possibly hold their ground against such overwhelming force? Earth's ships were outdated, and their technology was no match for the advanced weapons and AI-controlled warships of the Galactic Council. Despite their superior tactics, there was no denying that the humans were at a significant disadvantage. But as the old saying went, desperate times call for desperate measures. The humans had no choice but to dig deeper into their forgotten history, into the old technologies that had been buried and abandoned after Earth's peace agreement with the Council. Elena, the fleet's engineer, worked tirelessly, using every scrap of Earth's old technology she could find. The ships, once relics of a past war, had been retrofitted with makeshift weapons and defensive systems, but now Elena had to push the limits of their technology even further. She spent sleepless nights tinkering with the ship's engines and weaponry, looking for any advantage they could gain. The ship's old weapon systems were inefficient compared to the Council's lasers and plasma cannons, but Elena adapted them with her ingenuity, adding power boosters and reconfiguring their targeting systems to give them a fighting chance. Earth's technology might have been old, but it was still capable of surprising the enemy if used creatively. Meanwhile, Jace, the rebel hacker, was working on his own plan. The Council's AI-controlled warships were a formidable foe, but they had one vulnerability: their dependence on centralized systems. If Jace could hack into these systems and cause a glitch, the warships could be rendered useless. He worked alongside Elena, tapping into the fleet's old communication systems and looking for any weakness in the AI's defenses. The odds were stacked against them, but Jace's skill with technology was one of their greatest assets. If anyone could break through the Council's AI defenses, it was him. As the Galactic Council's retaliatory force approached, the human fleet put its plans into motion. They knew they couldn't win by strength alone, but they could make every move count. Earth's fleet used the asteroid fields and nearby planets to hide their ships, moving in and out of sight, using guerrilla tactics to pick off smaller Council ships. Every ship that they managed to disable was a victory, but each battle took its toll. The Council was relentless, sending wave after wave of ships, all with superior firepower. The rebels' ships were no match for the Council's power, but their bravery and determination made up for what they lacked in technology. The battle raged on, and it became clear that Earth's rebels were running out of time. The Council's forces were too strong, and their retaliatory strike was overwhelming. Commander Harris knew they had one final gambit to play: infiltrating the Galactic Council's most secure headquarters. It was a mission so dangerous that most of the crew believed it was suicidal, but it was their last hope. If they could get to the heart of the Council's operations and deliver a decisive blow, they might have a chance to turn the tide of the war. The headquarters, located on a heavily fortified planet deep within the heart of Council territory, was a place that no one had ever dared to breach. It was protected by an impenetrable defense network, and its core was guarded by thousands of elite enforcers. The Council's most advanced AI systems ran the planet, controlling every aspect of its defense. It was a fortress, a symbol of the Council's absolute power. And yet, it was the only target that could end the war in humanity's favor. The rebels began their preparations. This mission would require the utmost secrecy and precision. They would need to bypass the Council's most advanced surveillance systems and fight their way through heavily defended corridors. The stakes had never been higher, and the pressure on Commander Harris and his crew was immense. Failure meant the end of Earth's last hope, but success could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. As the fleet made its final push toward the heart of the Council's stronghold, the rebels knew that this would be the hardest battle they had ever fought. The Galactic Council would stop at nothing to defend its headquarters, and the humans had little time to waste. But despite the overwhelming odds, there was a fire in their hearts that the Council couldn't extinguish. The rebellion had already proven that humanity could survive in the face of impossible odds, and now, they would prove that they could strike back. As the humans braced for the final confrontation, they understood that the war was no longer just about vengeance or survival. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy: humanity would not be crushed, no matter how powerful the enemy was. The Galactic Council had underestimated them before, and it would be a mistake they would not survive a second time. The rebels were ready, and they would stop at nothing to see their mission through to the end. The time for the final confrontation had arrived. Earth's rebels, a small but fiercely determined fleet, now stood at the doorstep of the Galactic Council's most secure headquarters. This was it, the moment where everything would be decided. The Council had underestimated humanity for too long, and now they would pay the price. The stakes were higher than ever before: Earth's survival, revenge for the murdered child, and a desperate bid for justice. The crew, battle-worn and scarred from countless engagements, knew they had to give everything they had. Commander Harris, who had been leading this fight for what felt like an eternity, looked at his crew. Their faces were filled with a mix of fear and determination, but none of them backed down. Every member of this fleet had lost something, whether it was family, friends, or even a piece of themselves. But the memory of those they had lost fueled their resolve. The child who had been murdered by the Galactic Council was at the center of their fight, and every ounce of pain and grief was channeled into the final assault. The fleet approached the heavily fortified planet, its defenses more advanced than anything they had ever faced. The planet was surrounded by an impenetrable shield, and automated defense drones patrolled the skies. Earth's ships, small and outclassed, were no match for the technology of the Galactic Council. But they had one thing that no amount of firepower or AI could stop: their humanity. They had the courage to face impossible odds and the ingenuity to adapt in ways the Council couldn't predict. The final battle began as Earth's fleet launched a daring assault on the planet's defenses. The Council's forces, including their most elite warriors and AI-controlled defense systems, were ready for them. Every ship in the human fleet had been outfitted with makeshift weapons and patched-together tech, but this was no time to rely on brute force. The humans used every trick they knew. Launching surprise attacks from hidden positions, jamming the Council's sensors, and exploiting the weaknesses in their opponents' systems. Elena, the engineer, had worked tirelessly to reprogram their outdated ships, enabling them to slip past the automated defenses. Jace, the hacker, had found a way to manipulate the AI systems, causing glitches and rendering the enemy's weapons useless. As the battle raged on, the human fleet managed to break through the first layer of the Council's defenses. But it wasn't easy. Every victory came with a price. Ships were damaged, and lives were lost. It was clear that this would be a battle of attrition, where the human fleet would have to give their all to overcome the odds. Yet, despite the heavy losses, the crew pushed forward. They fought not just for themselves, but for the future of Earth and the generations to come. In the midst of the battle, the memory of the child who had been murdered by the Galactic Council was never far from their minds. The child's death had been the spark that ignited the rebellion, but it had also become a symbol of all the pain humanity had endured at the hands of the Council. Every shot fired, every ship that fell in battle, was in her honor. Her death had been senseless, a tragedy that the Council had thought would break humanity's spirit. Instead, it had done the opposite. It had united Earth's survivors and given them a purpose. As the fleet pressed deeper into the planet's core, the final obstacle stood before them: the Galactic Council's central command center, heavily guarded by an army of enforcers and advanced AI systems. This was the heart of the Council's power, the place where the decisions that shaped the galaxy were made. If the rebels could destroy this command center, it would deal a fatal blow to the entire Galactic Council. The final assault was nothing short of a miracle. The humans fought their way through wave after wave of enemies, using their ingenuity to overcome impossible odds. The AI-controlled defenses had been designed to anticipate every possible move, but they hadn't accounted for human creativity and the willingness to do whatever it took to win. Commander Harris led the charge, his crew following him into the heart of enemy territory. The Council's forces fought back fiercely, but humanity's tenacity proved to be stronger than anything the Council had expected. In the end, it was a simple act of ingenuity that turned the tide. Elena had designed a makeshift bomb, using Earth's outdated technology in a way that no one else would have thought of. The bomb was planted deep within the command center, and with a single, calculated move, it was detonated. The explosion reverberated through the command center, disabling the Council's AI systems and bringing their entire operation to a halt. The Galactic Council, once so powerful and unchallenged, was now in chaos. Without their central command, their forces began to crumble. The remaining enforcers, leaderless and disoriented, were no match for the humans who, despite all the odds, had managed to defeat them. The rebellion had won. In the aftermath, as Earth's survivors began to rebuild, their victory became a symbol of hope across the galaxy. The Galactic Council, now in disarray, was forced to acknowledge humanity's strength. No longer would they treat Earth as a powerless and insignificant planet. The rebellion had shown that no matter how small or overlooked a civilization might seem, it could still rise up and fight for what was right. The defeat of the Galactic Council was a testament to the power of human resolve, ingenuity, and the willingness to fight against tyranny. Earth may not have had the most advanced technology or the largest fleet, but they had something far more powerful, the spirit of humanity. Against all odds, they had fought for justice, for their fallen comrades, and for the future of their world. The remnants of Earth's fleet, once a forgotten relic of a bygone era, had become a symbol of hope. Across the galaxy, other civilizations would now know that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The victory was hard-earned, but it proved one thing: humanity would always fight for justice. No matter the enemy, no matter the challenge, Earth's people would never give up. And in the end, that was what made all the difference.